So hello and welcome to today's episode. So today podcast, I'm your host. My name is Thongaka from Myanmar, and I'm thrilled to guide you through a vital discussion on how environmental, social, and governance, known as ESG, is shaping the present and the future of our region, ASEAN. So in this section, we're taking a comparative lens to explore how two Southeast Asian nations, Indonesia and Myanmar, are navigating the evolving ESG landscape. So with a focus of the challenges and the opportunities ahead. So so it's rapidly becoming a benchmark for sustainable development, responsible investment, corporate accountability, and inclusive growth. So as the world shifts toward greener economies and more equitable system, so countries like Indonesia and Myanmar must rethink their development strategy through ESG lens. So especially as we face climate change, government crisis, and increasing demands for social justice across our community and our region. So to help us this timely and complex topics, I'm honored to welcome today's guest, Dr. Indra Refipal Sanbiring, a well-rounded professional in management education and the agriculture sector with over 15 years of experience. Dr. Indra has continued across marketing, commercial strategy, project management, and sustainability in Southeast Asia, and is a passionate advocate for people-centered development and ESG transformation. So Dr. Indra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning, Tun. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a chance as my capacity as an observer and practitioner of ESG topics. And definitely all the comments will be viewing from the general observation of the ESG world sustainability and trend. Definitely not necessarily representing one entity, but hopefully this can bring some flavor of how ESG being developed in Indonesia and Myanmar in particular.
Thank you so much for having the host and also IBB University for making this section happen. So first of all, I would like to introduce about ESG, and the first question, we need to talk about ESG. Why ESG now? And we were talking about regional agency and context. So from your perspective, why is ESG becoming more urgent in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia? Specifically, how do Indonesia and Myanmar compare in this current awareness and adoption of ESG principles?
Thank you so much. I think that is a very valid and relevant question, knowing the growing and emerging economies coming from Southeast Asia, and then we are consisted of a lot of different level of countries, from the developed countries until, as I mentioned, developing and emerging country. Firstly, this region is highly vulnerable to climate change impacts. And we see this not only happening in countries in ASEAN, but also around the world. And then we are also countries with a lot of support from the sea or coastal areas. And then we see a lot of rising climate change impact into the rising sea levels. And then we have extreme weather conditions and events that is coming from these past years. And this causes some of the impact, which is the scarcity even more in our resources, and then making our environmental sustainability a pressing concern. And then from the perspective of the economy, definitely ASEAN is with the rapid economic growth. And usually when we talk about the rapid economic growth, it often comes with the cost of social equity and labor rights, necessitating focus on the social part of the ESG itself. And then lastly, I think in ASEAN, of course, everyone, investors from the world, will see us as a potential market, but at the same time, potential resources or sources of many commodities as well. So this makes investors scrutiny and demand for sustainable practices, and pushing a lot of business and governments in Southeast Asia to adopt a better governance framework. So from that three perspective, that's, I think, how ESG is becoming more important to Southeast Asia countries. Do you want me to review from the Indonesia and Myanmar perspective as well?
If possible, could you please just briefly introduce about Myanmar and Indonesia as a context?
Definitely. And we all know that Indonesia and Myanmar is part of ASEAN, or Southeast Asia country or nations. And then in Indonesia, with a more larger and more integrated economy, we see a momentum of this ESG. Like, for example, government has introduced regulations and frameworks. One of the most known is the Financial Services Authority, or OJK, that is introducing the finance roadmap. And then also Indonesia Stock Exchange, or IDX, also introducing the ESG indexes. And then some of this assessment has been made to the leading companies in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, companies, especially for those who are largely listed in the stock exchange, is required and having a greater pressure from the international investors and stakeholders to disclose and improve the ESG performance. Like, for example, as I mentioned before, the OJK regulations number 51 in year of 2017 has been a remarkable standards to encourage financial institutions to integrate sustainability into the operations of a company. So this is one of the example how this is being developed so much in Indonesia, and we see a lot of space to grow as well. Meanwhile, if we take a look on the Myanmar, definitely we see some lacks and then staying behind, and then this is caused by a lot of instability that is happening in Myanmar nowadays. I think even more people out there, or the expertise out there, are seeing Myanmar as part of the potential, but at the same time, stability become something that is need to be taken care. So by saying that, maybe it's not as fast as what it is implemented in Indonesia, but I believe everyone will see Myanmar as the next country that can, chase the position and chase the level to later develop ESG more after there is some sort of clear situation and more stable situation to the politicals and the country situation.
I hope so, because I'm from Myanmar, so I want my country back to the stability. So yeah, I hope that will happen in the near future. And we need to thank Indonesia, because we are the friends. We are not the neighbors, very close neighbors, but we are located in the same region. So Indonesia will help us in our future. And thank you so much for the first question. And the second part, we will go to the environmental part, environmental challenges and approaches. So both Indonesia and Myanmar face serious environmental issues like deforestation, pollution, and climate vulnerability. So how are the approaches to environmental protection different or similar under the ESG framework?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. When we take the E part of the ESG, it is talking about more on an environmental part. And then this is where the baseline of the situations that we are focusing to be taken care from the ESG perspective and standard coming into places for all stakeholders between the two countries. And I believe that both Indonesia and Myanmar grapples with severe environmental challenges nowadays. We can say that deforestation is always been impacted sector because of the agriculture expansion. We cannot deny that a lot of more needs on the agricultural products is required for this country with high populations. And then some sectors which is strategic, like palm oil in Indonesia, or some forestry product like timber in Myanmar, is always become a focus of how we can minimize the deforestation impact. From the other side, when we talk about the air quality, air pollution from the industrial activities and waste management from the industrial activities is also become a concern. Definitely, if we would like to see some more growth, we can see some externalities of this impact, and this causing a lot contribution to the vulnerability of how our countries are facing the climate change impact. Like I mentioned earlier, right? The rising of sea level, the extreme weather conditions are common concerns nowadays. And if we take a look on a detailed country, definitely, again, I will highlight on how Indonesia has been running this for years now. Right. We see a more established, albeit it is still under legal and regulatory framework for environmental protection in Indonesia. Our government has made commitments to reduce emissions, to protect more forests, and address pollution. And then this is included in the environmental consideration within the ESG reporting frameworks. and then driven by regulations and investor pressures, which make some encouragement to companies to adopt more sustainable practices. For instance, we can see Indonesia is part of the ratified countries that ratified the Paris Agreement, and we are also submitted information about how we are committed and contributed to the climate change impact, and definitely develop a lot of program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from how we follow the United Nations effort on fighting against this. On Myanmar, again, not try to overgeneralize, but I think it will have a lot of more constraint due to the stability that we talked in the very first beginning. But I believe that there may be some civil society efforts that focus also on environmental conservation in Myanmar. Nowadays, the impact may be limited, but I think and I believe that with a more integrated and more stable condition in the future, this will implement the more meaningful ESG framework. And hopefully, as you mentioned, right, a lot of examples from Indonesia can be copied as well when things are getting more stable in Myanmar, so that we can be in the same level, or if not a better level, to face the environmental topic and then bringing more betterment and improvement in environmental focus.
And thank you so much. And one more thing I want to add is during the very big earthquake that happened in last month in Myanmar, Indonesia helped us a lot in terms of humanitarian assistance or other kinds of assistance. So I need to thank Indonesia, because you guys have a lot of preparedness for that kind of challenges. That's not directly related to the topic that we are discussing, but I need to thank Indonesia for having empathy to Myanmar people. Yeah. So another question that we are going to talk about is about the social aspect. So we are going to talk about community labor and inclusion. So social inequality, labor rights, and indigenous communities are key concerns. How is Indonesia responding through those ESG initiatives, and how does that compare to Myanmar's progress, especially in the current political and social situation? Yeah.
Yes, sure. When we talk about the S part of the ESG, as mentioned, it is talking about social. And most of the time, it is related to how we manage the people aspects that is happening in our country or community, right? And then I believe that there is some similarities between Indonesia and Myanmar as well. And talking about the traditional aspects, and then we have a lot of diverse culture, and also with the indigenous people taking place or involvement, which is taking care some part of the original environment and location, etc. So there is some points that we can learn by comparing the two countries. Specific to Indonesia, definitely because of all the pressures, all the requirement from the ESG initiative, Indonesia is also stepping up. And this is including how to address labor rights in a lot of companies or manufacturing and other sectors. And then we are including also a lot of initiative in promoting community engagement in resource extraction projects by saying that it is involving how people assessment being part of the project that is happening when it goes to the environmental project. And then in Indonesia, we're working towards greater social inclusion as well, which we promote and then become a basic, because we know that we are diverse, and then inclusion is one way to get more successful. And when we talk about the companies in Indonesia, definitely with all the investment coming not only from the local investment, but a lot coming from the foreign investment, we need to also make sure the companies is following the steps to face the pressure on the ensuring fair labor practices. And then to some extent, some of these practices, including how we respect the indigenous rights, and then contribute positively to the community in which these companies are operating. And then this is translated into a lot of corporate social responsibilities activities, on top of some other diversity and inclusion that is promoted internal of the corporate. And I believe that the regulations and guidelines is something that is supporting this emergence. and then encourage companies to report on their social impact and implement relevant policies so that community can see how much Indonesian companies is adopting all of the social aspect whenever they are operating as a business in Indonesia. Although we see a lot of challenges in implementing, but I think that the scoring or the track towards the better standard and better position is in place. On the other hand, the human rights topic is become a focus topic in Myanmar as well. And you know this even better than me as well. And then this probably something that slowing down some of the ESG framework implementation, and then has been hampered in severely activities in the ongoing political events or activities and widespread human rights focuses in Myanmar, right? So maybe we can see this in some more detail. It will invite a lot of international attention, and then definitely it is more like addressing the fundamental of human rights topics in Myanmar rather than taking from the framework of the ESG. So we see these two differences between Indonesia and Myanmar. But as I always mention, that definitely Myanmar can take learnings when it is step into more stable position, especially on taking care of the human rights topic, to later extend it to more broader and more specific standard as of framework introduced in ESG, especially on the social part.
The key is current situation in Myanmar. So whenever we discuss about the topic, so we need to talk about the current political situation in Myanmar. So without stability, Myanmar cannot thrive as other ASEAN countries like Indonesia. So the most important thing is to bring back to the normal situation. So I think this is very important thing to fix into ESG framework. So another part is about governance. So we have talked about environmental and social. So the last part in we need to focus is about the governance. That's about transparency and stakeholder engagement. So good governance is very crucial in ESG. So in terms of regulation, corporate transparency, and stakeholder engagement, so what strengths and weaknesses do you see in your country, Indonesia, and my country, Myanmar?
Yeah. When we talk about the governance, basically it's talking about the regulation and policies that is prevail, right? And then most of the time it is about how comply we are fulfilling our responsibilities, especially as stakeholders that is developing our business and then has a responsibility to disclose it to our investors. In Indonesia, one of the clear example is the development of the financial sector responsibility, especially what I mentioned with the OJK examples and the regulations. And this basically define the sustainable finance roadmap. And then it is also being shown in the stock exchange indexes on the ESG as well. And this define some transparency in showing the public how much of these publicly listed companies are responsible to do their business. And then this is defining some of the standards that is implemented, some of the pillar on the environment and social as well. But at the same time, also showing how we become a responsible business owner, a responsible investment executor, and definitely a responsible companies that always engage with our other external stakeholders, such as investors, NGOs, and also communities. I'm not saying that it has always been a perfect smooth governance, because when we talk about the governance, we are talking about transparency and stakeholder engagement, right? And then definitely there is some space to enforce more regulations, and not to mention as well that as a country living in Southeast Asia, corruption is one of the biggest threats that we need to face. And I believe that having this solved will give more quality on the governance. And then definitely there is a varying levels of the commitments to be more transparent, but with the regularity on monitoring from the respected bodies or respected reporting system, I believe that the governance will be helping a lot. And this is something that Myanmar can learn from Indonesia as well, I believe, because when the government is providing some more guidelines, it will bring more clarity to the stakeholders that is working in the business. And then from there, we believe that hand in hand, government and the business sectors can work to provide more transparency, to provide more disclosure that will be benefited not only for this time or for the short term, but can be benefited for the long term as well.
Very good discussion about governance. So when we talk about the governance, I'm thinking about both governments of Indonesia and Myanmar. So as you mentioned, so as we live in ASEAN, so the most prominent problem is like corruption. So that's not only happen in our two countries, but also happen in other countries. So that is one thing that we need to think about when we're talking about governance. Okay, thank you so much for explaining about ESG. So today we're going to talk about youth and education because I'm also a youth from Myanmar. So we need to talk about, when we talk about ESG, we need to talk about education and youth. So what roles are students and university playing in raising ESG awarenesses in Indonesia, like this kind of IBB university? So good similar strategies work for a country like Myanmar, where civil society is still developing.
Yeah, definitely. I always a believer of that the present is owned by the young generation, and then that is defining what future will we have, right? So it is not about waiting what will happen in the future, but I think definitely the young generation, especially students who are studying in the schools, in the university, need to take an important role on successing the ESG awareness in both countries. In Indonesia itself, I believe that students and universities are playing a very important role in raising ESG awareness. We saw a lot of universities have established sustainability centers, which also integrate the ESG principles in their curriculum or activities. And some of the institutions also fostered the student-led initiative to focus on environmental and social issues. I saw that this is a lot of coming to Indonesia, and then we have a lot of students program. Either it can be academics competitions, academics project, etc. that is actively campaigning for more sustainable practices on campus to start with, and then engage with more broader communities and business and policymakers through the study, through the report, and then participation in internship, etc. So I believe that this kind of activities will grow the awareness more in the younger generation, and definitely it will be a crucial part to drive the future of the ESG adoption. So you can start in your class, you can start in your student body or student board, and then you can start some of these important initiatives, either in social environment or even learning about the standard that is part of the governance aspect of ESG. So that's how I see things are moving nowadays. And the potential similar strategies definitely can be implemented in Myanmar. I believe young generation in Myanmar has a lot of potential. Somebody like you who are exposed to international exposure, talking and building network with the international universities. This is one way of campaigning or promoting a lot on the ESG. Yet the main important thing here is to really understand what is the basic of this ESG, and then you can start into small initiatives before try to tackle a lot of big initiatives, because with a small initiative it brings a foundation for you to know what exactly you want to do and what exactly you wanted to achieve. And then from there, you can reflect later on if you are in the shoes of the business owner, in the shoes of government, in the shoes of extended stakeholders, what kind of other ESG topics that you want to build up, or what kind of ESG topics that you want to promote more. So slowly but sure, this awareness will be developed. I'm not scaring people with a lot of pressure coming from investor and stuff, but I think pressure with more transparency and disclosure, and definitely thinking of lesser negative impact to our future, will be a key for students to know as well. And then they are having a good position as the agent of change as well.
Thank you so much for mentioning about the role of education and the role of youth in ESG framework. And another one I want to discuss about regional outlook and collaboration, as we are in ASEAN. So do you believe there is potential for ESG collaboration between countries like Indonesia and Myanmar, especially through regional platforms like Southeast Asian Nations Association, ASEAN? Yeah.
Yes, I am a believer on this because I believe as a ASEAN nations and countries, which is going together with the same vision and mission to develop more from different aspects, either it's economic, social, environment, and all these topics become one of the strengths that ASEAN countries need to be proud of. And I believe Indonesia and Myanmar is part of the joint effort to do all of this. With the current political situation in Myanmar, I also see that there are probably some limitations to make this whole collaboration into places, like implemented into real actions and implementing some of the framework into more solid plans, etc. But I believe that if we keep doing this and then keep focus on the sustainability issues, developing initiative related with climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable development, this will keep the torch alive. The spirit alive, and then this will be a good foundations to continue this moving forward. And then definitely we are not talking only about the two countries, right? We have some other good examples like the developed countries such as Singapore, for example, which has implemented a lot of this sustainable initiatives, and then they are taking care of the environment so well, despite the fact that economics may be ups and downs. But the point here is that we have a lot of countries that bring a good awareness and good examples that we can learn to. And then this is where ASEAN as a association will take an important places, especially providing and facilitating a dialogue and knowledge sharing on the ESG principles. And then while direct collaboration and specific projects may not be happening now or may be challenging in the short terms, but I believe in the long term and in the future, countries in ASEAN as a whole can support each other, and then can support Myanmar, can support Indonesia to step up to the better level of adoption on the ESG.
Very good discussion. So I also believe ASEAN is the main key platform to make a collaboration between the ASEAN nations, between Southeast Asian countries. So even we are far apart, we can march because there are many differences between each and ASEAN country. But I think because of ASEAN, we can collaborate in this matter. So thank you so much. And the last part, we are going to talk about private sector and ESG commitment. So finally, in both Indonesia and Myanmar, I'm mentioning Indonesia and Myanmar again and again. So we are talking about the role of private sector is critical for driving ESG forward. So from your observation, so how committed are businesses in these two countries to ESG principle? And are there any standout companies or sectors showing leadership or major gaps that still need to be addressed? And the last one, how should corporation navigate the ever-changing landscape of ESG?
Definitely. We see a lot of development that is happening now, and I talk on behalf of my observation, especially in Indonesia, when we are building a lot of private sector involvement. And then definitely ESG is not only targeting the private sectors, but why it is taking a crucial part of the private sector involvement, because private sector is the one who do business, and then most of the time they are relate with how they manage the usage of resources, and then to see how much impact that the business can bring, not only from the economics growth and stuff, but also how they operate in day-to-day basis, and then how they preserve and conserve the environment, and then minimize the externalities to the environment. And in Indonesia, I think the commitment of the private sector is definitely growing, and in the larger perspective, the publicly listed companies and those who has a significant international exposure are increasingly recognizing the importance of the ESG for the investors' relations. And then this also depicting the view on how to manage risk, and then how to sustain their business in a more long-term basis. And we saw sectors like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, green finance are seeing the emergence of companies that is actively integrating the ESG principles. One of the remarkable one, as per presented in the Indonesia Stock Exchange is the IDX Star or ESG Star program, which recognize many of these reputable companies. Majority of these companies are coming from the finance sector or banking, because definitely they are promoting more on the green finance. And then this is how the OGK is being implemented, so that all the arrangement, all the direction that government provide to the private companies who use the investment from this banking is taking care on the green financing itself. So this is very important steps and very important evidence of how private companies are being involved on implementing the ESG. We know that there are some more evidence, such as the multinational companies with more international exposure is implementing this more because they have a guideline not only from how they operate in the inside country like Indonesia, but also from the overall global view. And then most of the time, the global investors is required more disclosure and transparency on how they are operating in different part of the world. So I saw a lot of this good example been happening in Indonesia. One of the evidence is also the increased number of sustainability report. That is one of the artifact or the proof to show how much commitment that private companies are doing in Indonesia. And I saw the improvement of content quality whenever they are reporting. So it is more with confidence, more with accuracy in data, and more with impactful mission to successfully put the business in sustainability level. And not talking much on Myanmar, I'm still learning on how much Myanmar private companies doing with a very complex situation nowadays. But again, I believe with the standards that other private companies in other sectors can have, private sector in Myanmar can have too, because a lot of metrics, a good metrics is available, a good framework and methodology is available. So taking example of, if you would like to calculate your carbon footprint from the perspective of your greenhouse gases target in the countries, it is not something that is weird anymore, because we have a lot of standards that we can use. We have a lot of methodologies that we can practice. And I believe Myanmar and the private companies in Myanmar can learn from that one as well, and definitely can adopt that methodology as well.
Thank you so much for the last question. So that's going to be the last question. So let me wrap up the section. So I would like to recap the key takeaways that we have discussed today. So we have discussed a lot of questions. So first, we discussed why ESG is urgent in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, with Indonesia making progress while Myanmar face challenges. Like environmental issues like deforestation and climate risks demand stronger actions, while social concerns like labor rights and community inclusion highlight gaps in both countries. And then we discuss about governance and transparency that remain crucial, with Indonesia improving regulation while Myanmar struggles with instability. So youth and education also play a key role in ESG awarenesses, and regional collaboration through ASEAN could drive further progress. So the private sector also stepping in, but challenges remain. So ESG is just a trend. So it is essential for a sustainable future. So thank you so much, and big thank you, Dr. Indra and all the listeners. And we need to stay engaged and stay informed about this matter. Thank you so much. Terima kasih, Pak.